Alright folks, welcome to episode 3 of our 74 F-250 Restoration series. You just saw, got the old boy out of the shop under his own power. So it runs, kinda. As you can tell, it wasn't running great. So the plan for this video is we're going to be working on the carburetor. Basically, it's not idling well. So we're gonna have to dig into that and see what is causing that. But tonight, we saw it move for the first time in a year. So that's kind of exciting. And we're gonna put the seat in and yeah, see where we go from there.
Okay, so the engine will only run without continually pumping it. So when you pump it, there's an actual pump, accelerator pump in there that squirts gas in. So it's making it richer. Or if you manually hold the choke closed, which makes it richer, which means it's getting to air somewhere.
So when we put the carburetor on last month, the studs were too short to be able to fit a couple of gaskets in there and still get the nuts on to hold it on. So we kind of figured those gaskets weren't all that important, and the symptom we're having with the engine is it's getting too much air, and those gaskets would be a place that extra air is getting in. So we're going to see if we can figure out why they wouldn't go on before and put those on and see if that helps out the engine running issue a little bit. Carburetor is back on with one gasket installed, and we'll see if that makes all the difference. So that didn't fix anything, and after some further research we determined that these gaskets weren't supposed to be on the carb after all. So after this first failed attempt at fixing the lean mixture issue, Dad and I went down several rabbit holes of solution ideas. We first tried the obvious measure of cleaning the carburetor, and this was one of the first things we did back when we got the truck, but we went through it again making sure there was nothing plugged up. When this made no difference, we tried adjusting the carburetor float level, which seemed like it might be a little bit low, but again we didn't see any discernible improvement there. We're in the tinkering phase. We thought the exhaust system might be plugged up, so we checked to make sure there was good pressure coming out the tailpipe, and there seemed to be. So at this point, the truck wasn't really running any better, but Dad had learned how to keep it going with some skillful gas pedal manipulation. So we decided to attempt a little drive and see what happened. Oh, reverse works, that's good. Good things. Where are you going? Carver! Woo! Look and go. Alright, I think I'll hop in. No power steering, is that in mind?
A little bit.
A little bit? Yeah. Nice. That can suck it definitely. Shift gears. Again. Third gear.
Something's not right.
Yeah, maybe a lot of things.
Not much for steering.
Alright, nice and easy. Ready to crank on it. That wasn't too terrible. That's no gas. That's hands off. It will idle now. It's not a total not gonna do it. Okay, so we just went for a little drive. The tires did not explode. So, I mean, so far it's a win. It's running now. It's idling. Not idling great, but it's idling hands off, no throttle applied. That's massive improvement though.
Massive. Massive improvement.
Okay, so we just went for a little drive. How was that?
It was a little drive.
Like we just saw, it's idling with no throttle. Like it's actually idling now. It's not idling
It's not good.
capitally, but it's actually running. Like, and we drove it a little bit. So, you said there was a little bit of power steering?
Yeah, not much. The steering is, I had one of these that didn't have power steering, and it's just like that.
Okay. Other than that, I mean, it's...
Brakes could use some help.
It was a bit of a sketchy little drive, let's say that.
Back to where it was.
So, update time. It appears maybe we've accomplished nothing at all. It's still doing the same thing, and it won't idle again. Huh.
I think what I need to do is get a drawing of the vacuum lines and just start tracing them all out. And see if we can find a massive or intermittent or something that fluctuates. I don't know why we've got that oscillating going on.
So it was back to the drawing board. The first thing we tried was just taking it for another drive to see if it would run better afterward like it did before.
Too good.
No?
It's wide open.
That's all the way down?
Yeah.
Like the first time, it did run better after the drive, but we knew we really hadn't resolved anything. We first started making some strides when we tried holding the choke valve closed for several minutes after starting it up until it was good and warmed up. After a few minutes, it would run hands-free. So we decided to see if we could adjust the choke settings to try to achieve that result without holding the choke closed by hand. So last we were working on the truck, we determined that the choke was staying too open, especially while it was idling. And so what we're doing now is Dad did some research about what could be causing that, and there's a little adjustment that adjusts the default choke location. So that's what we're working on now. We're having to take the carburetor off once again. I think any carbureted engine you ever work on that has any fuel issues, you'll be taking the carburetor off at least 10 times. But anyway, so that's what we're doing now, and we're gonna see if that helps at all. I keep saying that. So exhibiting some good old-fashioned American ingenuity here, and possibly some questionable judgment. We'll see. But we made a little spacer. Here's the thing. So the choke is normally closed, and there's a little thing in here that when vacuum is pulled, pulls it open. Well, we determined that the choke wanted to be all the way closed to run properly. So maybe that pull-off thing, choke pull-off, is pulling it open too much. So to adjust that, we made a little spacer here that is going to not let it pull open so much. So it remains to be seen if this adjustment has the desired effect. But we do know something was a little bit amiss before, because there's a spec for how far the choke pull-off is supposed to pull the choke open. It's supposed to be like 5/64, and it was pulling open like 3/8. So that's a significant difference, and hopefully this has some impact. We shall see. Let's put the carburetor on. Yeah, really no better there. So now the attempt is going to be to disconnect that choke pull-off doohickey entirely, and because what we've determined, it's sitting there and it will idle beautifully with the choke entirely pushed closed. So like there's just no extra air getting in there. So maybe it's gonna be happy without this choke pull off bit at all. So we're gonna try that. I think the idea with the choke pull off, or I've been told, is that it helps it give a little on-demand power. However, it runs pretty happy without that at idle. So anyway, we're gonna try that and see what impact that has on the performance, and we'll let you know. Pretty happy. No, don't do that.
Choke opened up.
So we're letting it warm up thoroughly is kind of the idea. It's been at about 2 minutes or so before applying throttle or adjusting the choke at all, because you can hear it's running really nicely at this choke setting, fully choked. That's not on idle, but it's, you know, running real smooth. So we're seeing if we can just let it warm up thoroughly, and then if it'll run smooth with the regular choke setting. Running back there is running with no choke pull off and no help, and it's running, but really not running well. But it got to this point with no assistance really. Like it started up and ran well with that choke all the way closed with no choke pull off, and then, you know, worked its way down to this point pretty much after a few minutes. And we gave a little throttle and the choke opened up slightly. So, I mean, I think we're making a little progress, but nothing really groundbreaking yet. We are going to go for another drive, because who doesn't like drives? We're going to pull it out of here and see if it's got power is the main thing. Not much power. Well. We're still not all better. I think we made progress today in disconnecting the choke pull off, because when we disconnected that, it is now able to start, run, and warm up without us manually touching the choke. So hands off basically, which is kind of how an engine's supposed to work. But there's a lot going on still to work out. So we are back working on the F-250. I think what we're going to try to do today is work on the PCV situation, which is on the back of the carburetor, because it might have something wrong with it, and that could be another area where we have a vacuum leak where air is getting in. So I think that's the plan today. It's been a little bit since we were working on this, so we're getting ramped back up, getting the battery charged, so we're ready to crank it over and do whatever we need to. So yeah, let's see how it goes today. See if maybe we can finally get this thing figured out. So if you're wondering what a PCV valve stands for, yeah, I don't really know, but Dad does know. Apparently it's a positive crankcase ventilator valve, and takes the gases from the crankcase that are in there and burns them in the carburetor, or brings them into the carburetor and burns them again. So that's kind of what it does, and apparently it's run on vacuum, so that's why it could be a vacuum thing.
So these engines, I mean, it's a Ford engine, but they put them in Jeeps, and I had a Jeep pickup about the same year, about 73. And I rebuilt that in the late 70s. So I've been around them, but I'm not a diagnostic kind of mechanic. I reason through stuff, and it kind of makes sense as I go, but I get stumped on this kind of vacuum control stuff. So there's a forum or a blog called FordTrucks.com, and those guys, there's some really, really good mechanics there. Then they post a lot of good information about these old engines and their experience with them. So that's where I'm going now, is that PCV is a known problem with these engines. So anyway, FordTrucks.com, it's a forum that's really useful.
Before addressing the PCV, we decided to first look into the exhaust gas recirculate valve, or EGR, also located on the back of the carburetor. So we just investigated the EGR valve, and it appears the valve itself is working fine. However, the ports going to it could have a bit of an issue, or the possibility they may have burned through. Again, something we got an idea about from the FordTrucks.com forum. So we're going to be checking that out now, and yeah, another vacuum leak possibility. So to check out on the EGR ports that could have a problem, we're going to have to take the carburetor off again and look underneath it. So that's what Dad is doing right now. If that turns out to be a dead end, we do have a couple of other vacuum line possibilities, big vacuum lines that go to the brakes, and then one that goes down to the transmission, and a couple other ones that could have issues, so we're going to try to isolate those as well, and just continue troubleshooting through all the vacuum possibilities, and just, I think, not get our hopes up about any particular thing. That's going to be the operation.
That's it. This is the one that comes up from the exhaust manifold, and it's cut a hole here. But since it's plugged up, I don't think that's our problem. So what we got is this plate where the EGR valve bolts on here, and there's a port that goes all the way straight through into the intake manifold right there. And it is regulated by that valve that we had over there, and it opens and closes this port. This port, however, goes down through the casting into the exhaust manifold. And what we find here is that has been burned through, and this is deteriorated here where it matches to the top of the intake manifold to that port that goes down through the engine to the exhaust manifold. When this valve opens, it sucks exhaust gas through here, and it's hot. And so they made some of these out of aluminum, which this is a magnet, and this is not magnetic, it's aluminum. So I'm surprised it lasted this long. But I don't think that's our problem, because this is the intake leak to here, and it's sealed. Even if our EGR valve was working, it was plugged up. And it's still plugged here. So we don't have a vacuum leak. We don't have a working EGR, but we don't have a vacuum leak. And then over on top of the intake manifold, this port is totally plugged up as well. So we're not blowing exhaust gas out here either. So we have an issue that's a non-issue. So I'm going to make sure this is flat. Our gasket looks really good. And make sure that this seals around the throats here of the intake manifold. And we'll just move on.
So, we reinstalled the EGR plate and valve and turned our attention to plugging other vacuum ports, namely the PCV, which draws through a port on the back of the carburetor, and gave it yet another test run.
I think that's a lot better about having to keep it running. Not touching it.
The truck was now idling from a cold start, with no choke manipulation at all.
Brakes? It's got brakes.
One of them works really good. This is way better.
Way better?
Yeah, this is, I mean, I'm not,
It sounds kind of like an old truck now instead of a
It's-
dying.
it's waiting for the choke to pull off. We disconnected the pull off,
Oh, but it'll.
as it warms up,
The auto choke is still
choke
in-
is
in
going to open up.
effect.
Right. So we may have found a leak in the PCV circuit. It's way, way better than it was, but we'll see if we got any power. We did not have any power before, but it's acting like a V8.
It's kind of cool. It's clear to the right so far. Clear, clear, clear.
Better. It's still, okay, that could be timing. It's still pretty rough, but it's hitting on all of them.
I don't like 50 in this truck.
So that idle is 1,000% better. So now to get it where it feels like it's pulling
With itself?
yeah, all of itself.
Like that, it's kind of weird, right? They
Yeah,
cut out
but
there.
they say these these carburetors are prone to that.
Oh.
This is downhill.
That does feel a little bit like it has acceleration a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I've never timed it. We put all new, points and rotor and condenser and all of that stuff, and I just assumed it was running when it was turned off, so I put it back like it was. So
There's a lot to adjust there, right?
yeah, but it's a 1 foot operation now. I don't need all 3 feet
Oh.
to keep it running.
You do need all your hands, though.
Yeah. Put the ladder on.
For the last several times we've been out here working on the 74 F-250, it's been kind of frustrating just trying to trace vacuum leaks. Because we got it to where it was running, but it was running really lean, and we just couldn't figure out what the error was coming from. So we've been, digging into all the different vacuum systems, and we've uncovered some real issues, right?
Yeah, the EGR plate was burned through, like they said. It's an aluminum plate, so but it's plugged on the other side, so no exhaust is moving. So it wasn't our issue.
Yeah, and then like the choke pull off and that kind of stuff wasn't to spec, and we identified that stuff. It
Right.
actually, is an issue, but we kind of got to a point where it was, kind of status quo and wasn't really impacting the truck running. But today, what we discovered that was really significant was the PCV, and disconnecting it and plugging it at the carburetor seemed to mostly fix our vacuum leak issue. So the truck is running much better. How would you describe it compared to before?
Well, so it's different now because I can drive it with 1 foot. I don't have to have 1 foot on the brake and 1 foot on the gas to keep it running.
That's definitely an improvement. So we're really encouraged about the stage of the project. It's actually in decent working driving condition now, so it's pretty exciting. But let's not kid ourselves, there's still a lot of stuff that's messed up with this truck, with the electrical system. I mean, the wheels and tires need definitely replacing, and brakes, all that stuff. So stay tuned for next time, because we're going to be tackling some of those projects and getting it actually in a more working, roadworthy condition. Stay tuned for that, and we'll see you guys there.
Okay, so I'm just sitting here waiting for Levi to finish his drone footage, and I push on the brakes. Listen to how well it idles right now. Now take the foot off the brake. And you can hear it hissing. So we got a master cylinder, booster problem. Next.